The letter trembled in Grace Blackburn's weathered hands as she read the final line. Seeking a young bride, no older than 25. She let out a long breath that stirred the loose strands of honey-brown hair falling from her carefully pinned bun. At 38, Grace wasn't just a few years beyond the cowboy's preferred age, she was practically ancient by mail-order bride standards. It was 1878, and the promise of California's clear skies and fresh beginnings called to her like a siren's song. The small room above the millinery shop in Boston where she'd worked for 15 years had grown stifling. With each passing season, the walls seemed to inch closer, reminding her that life was slipping through her fingers. When her friend Martha had shown her the advertisement seeking brides for the men of Panamint, Grace had felt a spark of hope, one she now struggled to keep alive. Age is just a number, Martha had insisted when Grace shared her concern. Out west, they need capable women, not just pretty faces. Grace wasn't sure she believed it, but the alternative remaining in Boston, fading into spinsterhood while watching younger women build the lives she yearned for, seemed unbearable. So she'd replied to the advertisement, careful to omit her age, focusing instead on her skills as a seamstress, her cooking abilities, and her eagerness to build a life in the West. Now, standing at the dusty train station in Panamint, California, Grace felt her courage wavering. The journey had been arduous, 4 days of rattling train cars, hard benches, and anxious anticipation. Her blue traveling dress, though carefully pressed before departure, now hung limp and wrinkled around her slender frame. The air was thick with heat and the scent of sage. Panamint sprawled before her, a collection of wooden buildings shimmering in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful in a stark, honest way, so different from Boston's crowded streets and sooty air. "Miss Blackburn." A deep voice pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to find a tall man approaching, hat in hand. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around eyes that were the clear blue of a winter sky. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling in the quiet strength of his features. "Yes, I'm Grace Blackburn," she replied, extending her hand. "Dawson Price," he said, taking it in a firm but gentle grip. "I'm here to escort you to Mrs. Willoughby's boarding house. She takes in the mail-order brides until the matchmaking is sorted." "Matchmaking?" Grace asked, her throat suddenly dry. Dawson nodded, reaching for her trunk. "Several men placed advertisements. The ladies stay at the boarding house while they meet the gentlemen who responded to their letters. Once matches are agreed upon, the marriages are arranged." Grace swallowed hard. "But I didn't respond to a lady's advertisement. I responded to one placed by a gentleman seeking a bride." Dawson paused, her trunk half lifted. "Whose advertisement did you answer?" "A Mr. James Elliot." Something flickered in Dawson's eyes. "I see. Mr. Elliot is expecting someone else, I believe. There must have been some confusion." The weight of his words settled on Grace's shoulders. "Someone younger, you mean?" He didn't deny it, which confirmed her fears. "Let's get you settled at Mrs. Willoughby's regardless. We'll sort it out." The walk to the boarding house was mercifully short. Dawson carried her trunk with ease, occasionally pointing out buildings of interest: the general store, the assayer's office, the saloon. Grace barely heard him, her mind racing with uncertainty. Mrs. Willoughby proved to be a bustling woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She welcomed Grace warmly enough, but looked confused when Dawson explained the situation. "Mr. Elliot is expecting Miss Caroline Turner tomorrow," she confirmed, consulting a ledger. "She's 22, from Philadelphia." Grace felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I see. It seems I've made a terrible mistake." "Nonsense," Mrs. Willoughby said briskly. "You're here now, and Panamint can always use another good woman. We'll find you a suitable match." I don't want to impose, Grace began, but Mrs. Willoughby waved away her concerns. You'll stay here while we sort things out. Room 3 is yours up the stairs, second door on the right. Supper's at 6 sharp. Left with little choice, Grace thanked her and followed Dawson upstairs with her trunk. At the door to room 3, she turned to him. Thank you for your help, Mr. Price. He set down her trunk and studied her face for a moment. How old are you, Miss Blackburn, if you don't mind my asking? The question startled her, but she saw no judgment in his eyes. 38, he nodded slowly. I thought as much. Most of the men here are looking for young women, it's true, but youth isn't everything. He hesitated, then added, age means you know what matters. With that enigmatic statement, he tipped his hat and left her standing in the doorway, wondering what exactly he meant. Grace's room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. She unpacked her few belongings, carefully hanging her dresses in the wardrobe to remove the wrinkles of travel. Among them was her best dress, a deep blue silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She'd spent 3 months' savings on it, hoping to make a good impression on her future husband. Now, she wondered if she'd ever wear it. At supper, she met the other residents of the boarding house, 3 young women like herself, waiting for matches, and 2 elderly sisters who had lived there for years. The conversation flowed around her as she picked at her food, the younger women giggling and speculating about their future husbands. I'm hoping for a rancher, said Emma, a pretty blonde of perhaps 20. I've always loved horses. I'd prefer a shopkeeper, replied Beatrice, equally young. Steady work and you don't have to live miles from town. The third girl, Sarah, shrugged. As long as he's kind and has his own home, I'll be content. They all turned to Grace expectantly. I'm not sure yet, she admitted. I came to meet a specific gentleman, but there was a misunderstanding. Mrs. Willoughby, at the head of the table, spoke up. Miss Blackburn is a skilled seamstress from Boston. She'll be an asset to whichever man is smart enough to claim her. Grace felt a rush of gratitude for the older woman's kindness. After supper, she helped clear the dishes, then excused herself to her room. The day's travel and emotional strain had left her exhausted. She was just preparing for bed when a knock came at her door. It was Mrs. Willoughby. There's someone to see you downstairs, dear. Puzzled, Grace quickly rebuttoned her dress and smoothed her hair. Who could be calling on her? She had no acquaintances in Panamint except those she'd met at dinner. In the small parlor downstairs, Dawson Price waited, hat in hand. He'd changed his clothes, the dusty trail clothes replaced by a clean shirt and dark vest. Mr. Price, she said in surprise. Is something wrong? No, madam, he replied, looking somewhat uncomfortable. I've been thinking about your situation and I have a proposition for you. Grace's heart beat faster. A proposition? I own a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Nothing grand about 1,000 acres, some cattle, a decent house. I've been looking for a wife, but I haven't placed any advertisements. I prefer a more direct approach. Grace wasn't sure she understood. What are you saying, Mr. Price? He took a deep breath. I'm 35 years old, Miss Blackburn. I've built something good, but it's lonely. I need a partner, not just a pretty ornament, someone who understands hard work and doesn't shy away from challenges. You're proposing marriage. To me, we've only just met, he smiled slightly. Isn't that the nature of these arrangements? You came prepared to marry a stranger. She couldn't argue with that logic. Why me? There are younger women arriving daily. I told you age means you know what matters. Those young girls have stars in their eyes. They're dreaming of romance, not understanding the reality of life out here. You've lived enough to know that a good partnership is worth more than fleeting passion. His frankness was refreshing, if somewhat unromantic. You don't know anything about me, Mr. Price. I know you had the courage to travel across the country alone. I know you carry yourself with dignity. I can see the intelligence in your eyes and the capability in your hands." He paused. "I'm not offering romance from a dime novel, Miss Blackburn. I'm offering respect, security, and companionship. Perhaps affection will come in time." Grace was speechless. It wasn't the proposal she'd imagined, but there was something appealingly honest about it. Still, caution prevailed. "This is very sudden. I would need time to consider." He nodded. "Of course, I'll call on you tomorrow if I may. Perhaps we could walk through town, get better acquainted." "I'd like that," she found herself saying. After he left, Grace sat in the parlor for a long time, contemplating his offer. It wasn't love, but it was a chance more than she'd expected when she'd learned of the mix-up with Mr. Elliot. Dawson Price seemed decent and straightforward. His ranch sounded solid, and he clearly respected her maturity rather than seeing it as a drawback. Could she build a life with him? It was too soon to know. But for the first time since arriving in Panamint, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, Grace woke to bright sunshine streaming through her window. She dressed carefully in a simple, but becoming gray dress with a touch of lavender trim subdued enough for a new arrival, but flattering to her complexion and gray-green eyes. Mrs. Willoughby smiled knowingly when Grace came down to breakfast. "Mr. Price is well respected in these parts," she said as she poured coffee. "Built that ranch from nothing after the war, never shows his temper, pays his debts, and goes to church most Sundays." "You make him sound like a saint," Grace replied, buttering a biscuit. "No saint, Mrs." Willoughby chuckled. "But a good man. Better than most alternatives for a woman alone in these parts." Grace considered this. "I've been supporting myself for many years, Mrs. Willoughby. I came west for a new beginning, not out of desperation." No offense meant, dear. Independence is admirable, but it can be a cold companion. The older woman patted her hand. "Just keep an open mind." After breakfast, Grace explored the small yard behind the boarding house. A kitchen garden thrived in the morning sun, tomatoes, beans, and herbs providing fresh ingredients for Mrs. Willoughby's table. Beyond the garden, a chicken coop housed a dozen fat hens. It was a simple but efficient household, much like what she imagined Dawson's ranch might be. At 10 o'clock he arrived as promised. He wore the same clean shirt and dark vest from the previous evening, with a freshly brushed hat and polished boots. Grace appreciated the effort. "Good morning, Miss Blackburn," he said, his deep voice pleasant in the morning quiet. "I thought we might walk to the general store. The owner's wife, Mrs. Peterson, is looking for help with sewing and alterations. If you're interested, that is." Grace was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Price. I would indeed be interested." They walked slowly down the main street, Dawson pointing out buildings and sharing bits of local history. The town had grown rapidly after silver was discovered in the nearby hills in 1872, he explained. Before that, it had been little more than a watering stop for travelers. "The mines are playing out now," he told her, "but Panamint will survive. The ranches and farms in the valley give it purpose beyond just extracting wealth from the earth." His evident pride in the community spoke well of him, Grace thought. This wasn't a man looking to make a quick fortune and move on. The general store was a large, well-stocked establishment with everything from mining supplies to fabric, canned goods to farm implements. Mrs. Peterson, a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s, greeted Dawson warmly. "So this is your Boston lady," she said, eyeing Grace with frank curiosity. "Dawson tells me you're a seamstress." "Yes, madam. I worked at Harper's Millinery in Boston for 15 years, but I'm experienced in all types of garment making and alteration." Mrs. Peterson's face lit up. "Millinery. Oh, that's wonderful. We get the fashion plates from San Francisco, but nobody here has the skills to make proper hats. The ladies of Panamint will be thrilled." By the time they left the store an hour later, Grace had a part-time position helping with alterations and creating hats to order. The pay was modest but fair, and the work would provide both income and social connections. "Thank you," she told Dawson as they continued their walk. "I hadn't expected to find employment so quickly," he shrugged. "It's as much for Mrs. Peterson's benefit as yours. She's been complaining about needing skilled help for years. Still, you didn't have to arrange it. Many men would expect their wives to focus solely on home and family." "I'm not many men," he replied simply. "A woman with skills should use them, makes for a happier household." His progressive attitude surprised and pleased her. As they walked, Grace found herself studying him more closely. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. His hands were work-roughened but clean, his nails trimmed. When he spoke to people they passed, his manner was respectful but never subservient. They stopped for lunch at a small cafe, where Dawson ordered steak and potatoes for himself and chicken pot pie for Grace. "I hope you don't mind me ordering for you," he said, seeming suddenly uncertain. Force of habit when entertaining business associates. "I don't mind," she assured him, "though I'm curious why you chose pot pie for me." "You mentioned your mother's chicken pot pie in your letter to Elliot," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "You wrote that it was your specialty." Grace was stunned. "You read my letter," he nodded. "Elliot showed it to me yesterday after I mentioned meeting you. He thought it was amusing." The word stung. "I see," Dawson frowned. "That came out wrong." "What I mean is, he didn't appreciate what was clear between the lines, that you're a woman of substance, not just looking for security but offering real partnership." His perception softened her hurt. "And you saw that in a letter about cooking and sewing." "I saw it in how you wrote, not just what you wrote." He paused as their food arrived. "You didn't beg or flatter. You presented yourself honestly with dignity. That's rare." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The pot pie was excellent, not as good as her mother's recipe, but satisfying nonetheless. "Tell me about your ranch," Grace said eventually. "You mentioned cattle," Dawson nodded, his face lighting up with pride. "Mostly cattle, yes, about 300 head of Hereford's good stock. Some horses, too. I breed quarter horses for working cattle, and there's a kitchen garden, some fruit trees, chickens." "It sounds lovely. And you manage it alone?" "I have 2 hired hands brothers named Esteban and Miguel Rodriguez. Good men, been with me 4 years now. They have a cabin on the property." He hesitated, then added, "The house is decent. 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a parlor, nothing fancy but solid. I built it myself." Grace was impressed. "That's quite an achievement, Mr. Price." "Dawson, please. If we're to be married, formality seems unnecessary." The direct reference to marriage reminded Grace of the decision looming before her. "About that, I'm still considering your offer. It's a significant decision." He nodded, no sign of offense in his expression. "Of course. Take the time you need." He paid for their meal, then suggested they continue their tour of the town. The afternoon passed pleasantly as they visited the church, the small schoolhouse, and finally the town's modest park, really just a grassy area with a few benches and young trees. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they sat on one of the benches, watching children play. "I should be honest about something," Dawson said after a comfortable silence. "I was married before, briefly. Her name was Rebecca. She died in childbirth 8 years ago, along with our son." Grace's heart ached for him. "I'm very sorry." He nodded, accepting her sympathy. "It was a hard time, made harder because we married for the wrong reasons: youth, passion, loneliness. We barely knew each other, really." "Is that why you value maturity now?" "Partly." He looked at her directly. "I'm not looking to replace Rebecca. What I want now is different, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. Less fire, perhaps, but more substance." His honesty was both refreshing and a little deflating. Grace had never been one for romantic fantasies, but some small part of her had hoped for more than a practical arrangement. "I understand," she said carefully, "though I hope you're not opposed to affection entirely." For the first time, she saw him truly smile, a warm expression that transformed his serious face. "Not at all. I'm simply saying that lasting marriages need more than just affection to weather life's challenges." As the sun dipped lower, they walked back to the boarding house. At the door, Dawson removed his hat. "I'd like to show you the ranch tomorrow if you're willing. It seems only fair that you see what you'd be agreeing to." "I'd like that very much. I'll come by with the wagon at 9 then." He hesitated, then took her hand. His touch was warm, his calloused palm a testament to years of hard work. "Good night, Grace." "Good night, Dawson." Inside, the younger women peppered her with questions about her day with the handsome rancher, as they called him. Grace answered vaguely, unwilling to share the details of their conversations or his proposal. These were private matters, not gossip fodder. In her room that night, Grace stood before the small mirror, studying her reflection critically. She was still attractive, she supposed. Her honey-brown hair showed only a few strands of silver at the temples. Her eyes were clear, her skin relatively unlined thanks to her habit of avoiding direct sun. But she was undeniably older than the fresh-faced girls downstairs, with their smooth hands and carefree laughter. Would Dawson regret choosing her? Would he wake up beside her someday and wish he'd waited for someone younger, someone who could more easily bear children? She was not yet too old for that, but her childbearing years were certainly waning. She thought of his words, "Age means you know what matters." Perhaps he truly did value her maturity, her life experience. Perhaps he saw in her what she hoped she could offer: steadiness, wisdom, and a heart that, while cautious, was still capable of deep devotion. Sleep came slowly that night, her mind full of possibilities and uncertainties. The morning dawned clear and bright. Grace dressed in her most practical outfit, a sturdy brown skirt and white shirtwaist, with comfortable boots suitable for walking. She packed a small valise with essentials for an overnight stay, though Dawson hadn't mentioned it. Better to be prepared, she reasoned. At precisely 9, she heard the rattle of a wagon outside. Mrs. Willoughby appeared at her door almost immediately. "Mr. Price is here with his wagon," she announced. "Are you spending the night at the ranch?" Grace felt herself blushing. "He didn't specify. I thought it prudent to pack a bag in case the tour runs late." Mrs. Willoughby's expression was knowing. "Very sensible. Though I should remind you that propriety demands a chaperone for overnight visits." "Of course," Grace said quickly. "I wouldn't consider staying without proper arrangements." Was all Mrs. Willoughby said, but her raised eyebrow spoke volumes. Dawson was waiting by a well-maintained wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. He wore work clothes today, denim trousers, a blue cotton shirt, and his ever-present hat. He smiled when he saw her approaching with her valise. "Planning to stay a while?" he asked, taking the bag. "I thought it best to be prepared in case we're delayed," she explained. "Though Mrs. Willoughby reminded me that a chaperone would be required for an overnight visit," he nodded. "The Rodriguez brothers' mother lives with them. Senora Rodriguez is a respectable widow who would be happy to serve as chaperone, should the need arise." The 5-mile journey to the ranch took just under an hour. As they left town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling grassland dotted with oaks and pines. Cattle grazed in the distance, their red-brown coats bright against the green grass. "This is all yours," Grace asked, impressed by the scale of the operation. The east and north portions, Dawson confirmed. The land to the west belongs to the Campbell family good neighbors. To the south is Hollister's place, but he's selling out, moving to San Francisco apparently. Is his land for sale then? Dawson nodded. I've been considering making an offer. It's good grazing land with a reliable creek. Grace admired his ambition. You plan to expand your operation. If I can do so sensibly. I don't believe in taking on more than I can manage or finance. He glanced at her. Would that bother you, the uncertainty of expansion? She considered the question seriously. No, not if it's done prudently. Growth is necessary for any viable business. But I would hope to be consulted on major decisions that affect our future. I wouldn't have it any other way, he assured her. A wife should be a partner, not a bystander. The wagon crested a small rise, and suddenly the ranch lay before them. The house was just as Dawson had described, not grand but solid and well-proportioned. 2 stories of weathered cedar with a wide porch wrapped around the front and one side. A large barn stood nearby, along with several smaller outbuildings. A vegetable garden and orchard were visible behind the house, and a windmill creaked lazily in the light breeze. It's lovely, Grace said sincerely. Dawson's expression softened with evident pride. It's taken 8 years to build it to this point. The house was just a 2-room cabin when I started. As they pulled into the yard, a woman emerged from the house short and plump, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a bun. She wore a simple dress and apron, her brown face creased with smile lines. "Senora Rodriguez," Dawson called out, bringing the wagon to a stop. "I've brought a visitor." The woman approached, curiosity and warmth in her dark eyes. "Welcome, señorita," she said, her English accented but clear. "I am Elena Rodriguez." Dawson helped Grace down from the wagon. "This is Miss Grace Blackburn from Boston. She's considering my proposal of marriage." Elena's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pleasure. "Ah, this is wonderful news. Come inside. I have just made coffee." The house's interior was as solid and unpretentious as its exterior. The front door opened into a spacious main room that served as both parlor and dining area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while large windows let in ample light. The furniture was simple but well-crafted: a long dining table with 8 chairs, a comfortable-looking sofa, 2 armchairs, and a low table. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with a surprising variety of volumes. Grace ran her finger along the spine's history, poetry, agricultural texts, even some novels. "You're a reader," she observed. Dawson nodded. "Winter evenings are long. Reading passes the time and expands the mind." Elena bustled about, setting coffee cups on the table and bringing out a plate of cookies. Sit," she urged them. "Miss Blackburn must be tired from journey." "Not at all," Grace assured her, though she gratefully accepted the offered chair. The ride was quite pleasant. Over coffee, Elena asked polite questions about Grace's journey west and her impressions of Panamint. There was no mention of her age or the unusual circumstances of her arrival, for which Grace was grateful. After coffee, Dawson gave her a tour of the house. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a modern cast-iron stove and ample workspace. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms: the master bedroom with a large bed and chest of drawers, 2 smaller but comfortable guest rooms, and a small sewing room that could easily be converted to a nursery if needed. "The house needs a woman's touch," Dawson admitted as they returned downstairs. "I built it sound, but I've never had much eye for decoration." Grace could see what he meant. The rooms were clean and functional but Spartan. Curtains, rugs, and personal touches were minimal. It was a house waiting to become a home, It has good bones, she assured him. The rest is easily remedied. Next, he showed her the barn where his prized quarter horses were stabled alongside sturdy workhorses. The garden was well tended, with neat rows of vegetables and a chicken coop where fat hens scratched and clucked. Everything spoke of careful planning and diligent maintenance. By mid-afternoon, they had toured the entire homestead. Dawson suggested they ride out to see some of the pasture eland, so he saddled 2 horses, a gentle bay mare for Grace and a tall chestnut gelding for himself. "You ride?" he asked as he helped her mount. "Not for many years," she admitted, "but I grew up in western Massachusetts. My father kept horses." The mare was patient with her rusty skills, and soon Grace was riding comfortably alongside Dawson as they traversed the rolling grassland. He pointed out boundary markers, water sources, and the best grazing areas, speaking with evident knowledge and passion about his land and animals. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they stopped on a hilltop overlooking a small creek. Dismounting, they allowed the horses to graze while they sat on a fallen log. "What do you think?" Dawson asked after a companionable silence. "Could you see yourself making a life here?" Grace considered the question seriously. The ranch was impressive, far more substantial than she had imagined when he first described it. It was clear that Dawson was not just a hard worker, but a smart businessman. The life he offered would be comfortable, if not luxurious. But what of the man himself? He was respectful, intelligent, and straightforward. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but appealing in his quiet strength and integrity. There was no spark of passion between them, but there was an easy companionship that seemed promising. "I could," she said finally. "It's a beautiful place and you've built something admirable here, but marriage is about more than property and livestock." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're wondering if we would suit each other in other ways." "Yes. I can't offer guarantees, Grace. I can only tell you that I value honesty, kindness, and loyalty above all else. I believe in working hard but also in enjoying the fruits of that labor. I want children if we're blessed with them, but I would not be devastated without. I enjoy conversation and respect intelligence." He paused. "Does that help?" "It does," she said. "And I appreciate your honesty. I believe in those same values. I've never sought grand passion. I've seen too many marriages destroyed by it. What I want is respect, kindness, and the chance to build something meaningful together." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Then perhaps we would suit each other well." The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with possibility. In his weathered face, Grace saw sincerity and a quiet hope that matched her own. "I think we would," she said softly. His hand tightened on hers. "Does that mean you're accepting my proposal?" "It means I'm strongly considering it." She smiled at him. "A lady should maintain some mystery, Mr. Price." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his serious face. "Fair enough, Miss Blackburn. I can be patient." The sun was setting as they rode back to the ranch, painting the landscape in gold and pink. Alina had prepared a hearty dinner of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. She ate with them, providing a natural chaperone that preserved propriety while allowing conversation to flow easily. After dinner, Esteban and Miguel Rodriguez joined them in the parlor. The brothers were in their 30s, with the same warm brown eyes as their mother but taller, with the wiry strength of men who worked outdoors. They were respectful toward Grace, but spoke to Dawson with the easy familiarity of long association. When the clock struck 9, Alina stood. "It grows late. Miss Blackburn will stay in the blue room, yes?" Dawson looked to Grace. "If you wish to stay. The wagon trip back to town in the dark can be treacherous." Grace hesitated. Staying unchaperoned would be inappropriate, but with Alina in the house, propriety was satisfied. More importantly, she wanted to see the ranch in the morning light, to experience what it would be like to wake up in what could become her home. "Thank you, I would like to stay," she said. "If it's truly no imposition." "None at all," Dawson assured her. Alina showed her to the blue room, the second largest bedroom, with a comfortable bed, washing stand, and bureau. The valise Grace had packed contained a nightgown, fresh undergarments, and toiletries. Alina provided towels and a pitcher of fresh water. "Senor Dawson is good man," Alina said as she turned down the bed. "Honest, kind, hard worker." She gave Grace an appraising look. "You would be good wife for him. Sensible age, strong hands." Grace smiled at the practical assessment. "Thank you, Senora Rodriguez. Call me Alina, please. If you marry Senor Dawson, we will be family." After Alina left, Grace prepared for bed, washing her face and hands and changing into her nightgown. The room was comfortable, with soft linens and a warm quilt against the cool night air. Through the open window, she could hear the gentle sounds of the ranch settling for the night, horses nickering softly in the barn, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind in the trees. It was peaceful in a way Boston had never been, with its constant noise and bustle. Here, one could hear oneself think, could feel connected to the rhythms of the natural world. Grace slept deeply and woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment, she was disoriented, then remembered where she was in Dawson Price's ranch house, in what could become her home. She dressed quickly in the clothes she'd worn the day before, then made her way downstairs. The house was quiet but for the sounds of activity in the kitchen. There she found Alina kneading bread dough, the sleeves of her dress rolled up to expose strong, capable arms. "Good morning," Grace said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Alina looked up with a warm smile. "Good morning. Coffee is ready. Breakfast soon. Senor Dawson is in barn. He say to tell you he returns for breakfast." Grace poured herself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching Alina work. There was something soothing about the rhythmic motion of the older woman's hands as she shaped the dough into loaves. "How long have you worked for Mr. Price?" Grace asked. 5 years, Alina replied. "Since my sons come to work here. Before, I cook for mining camp." "Hard work, many men, no respect. Here is better. Senor Dawson treats us like family." That spoke well of him, Grace thought. A man's character was often most clearly revealed in how he treated those who worked for him. Dawson returned shortly, washing up at the pump outside before coming in for breakfast. His hair was damp, his face freshly shaved. He smiled when he saw Grace at the table. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you. Your home is most comfortable." Breakfast was a hearty affair: eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy with strong coffee to wash it down. Dawson ate with the healthy appetite of a man who worked hard physically, but his table manners were impeccable. After breakfast, he suggested a walk in the orchard. The day was already warm, the sky a clear, endless blue. Apple and pear trees stood in neat rows, their branches heavy with ripening fruit. "Another month and they'll be ready for harvest," Dawson said, reaching up to touch a particularly fine pear. "Alina makes preserves that last us through the winter." They walked in companionable silence for a while, then Dawson cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about marriage being more than property and livestock." Grace nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I want you to know that while I may not speak of it easily, I do believe in affection between husband and wife. Rebecca and I married young and rashly, it's true, but there was love between us. I'm not opposed to love, Grace. I just believe it should grow from mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than blind passion." The admission clearly cost him some effort, and Grace appreciated his willingness to be vulnerable. "I feel the same way," she assured him. "At my age, I've seen enough of life to know that lasting relationships are built on stronger foundations than mere attraction." "That's what I admire about you," he said, turning to face her. "Your wisdom, your clear-eyed view of the world. You don't expect life to be a fairy tale, but you haven't become bitter or cynical either." His words warmed her. "Thank you. That's perhaps the nicest compliment I've received." They had stopped walking, standing now in the dappled shade of an apple tree. Dawson reached out, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence, and took her hand in his. "Grace Blackburn, I know we've only known each other for 2 days, but I believe we could build a good life together. Will you marry me?" The proposal was simple and direct, like the man himself. Grace looked into his clear blue eyes and saw sincerity, respect, and something that, while not yet love, could grow into it with time and care. "Yes, Dawson Price, I will marry you," she answered, her heart surprisingly light with the decision. His smile was like sunrise. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you. I promise to be a good husband to you." "And I will strive to be a good wife to you," she replied. They stood for a moment, hands clasped, sealing their agreement in the quiet beauty of the orchard. It wasn't a romantic proposal from a storybook, but it felt right, honest, and grounded in reality, just like Dawson himself. "When would you like to marry?" he asked as they resumed their walk. "I see no reason for a long engagement," Grace said practically. "I came west to start a new life, and I'm ready to begin it, though I would like a proper wedding, even if it's small. Of course, the church in town is simple but lovely, and Alina would never forgive me if we didn't have a proper celebration afterward." They agreed on a date 3 weeks hence, which would allow time for Grace to settle her affairs at the boarding house and for Dawson to prepare the ranch for his new bride. They would be married in the church in Panamint, with a reception afterward at the ranch. As they returned to the house, Dawson asked, "Will you stay at the ranch today? I'd like to show you more of the operation." "I should return to town," Grace said reluctantly. "Mrs. Willoughby will be wondering about me, and I need to give notice at the store." "Of course. I'll take you back after lunch." They spent the morning reviewing the household accounts, with Dawson explaining his system of record keeping and Grace offering suggestions for improvements. It was a surprisingly enjoyable task. Revealing their compatible approaches to financial matters, both were prudent but not miserly, valuing quality and durability over false economy. After a light lunch, Dawson hitched the wagon for the return journey to Panamint. Alina packed a basket with fresh bread and preserves for Grace to take to the boarding house, embracing her warmly before she departed. "You come back soon," the older woman said. "I teach you my recipes before wedding." The ride back to town was filled with practical discussion of wedding preparations and plans for Grace's move to the ranch. It was, Grace reflected, perhaps the most unromantic courtship in history, but it suited her practical nature. At the boarding house, Mrs. Willoughby raised her eyebrows at Grace's overnight absence, but said nothing when informed of the engagement. The younger women were more openly curious, peppering Grace with questions about Dawson and the ranch. "Is he romantic?" Emma wanted to know. "Did he propose on bended knee?" "He was sincere," Grace replied, unwilling to share the private details of their agreement. "And his ranch is beautiful." Over the next 3 weeks, Grace divided her time between Panamint and the ranch. In town, she worked at the general store, building relationships with the local women who came for fabric and notions. She ordered modest furnishings to add comfort to the ranch house curtains for the bare windows, a colorful rug for the parlor, linens and dishes to supplement Dawson's bachelor supplies. At the ranch, She spent time with Alina, learning her recipes and routines. The two women formed an easy friendship based on mutual respect and shared practical values. Alina taught Grace to make tortillas and spicy stews, while Grace shared her skills in bread making and pie baking. Dawson was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each day to speak with Grace, to show her some aspect of the operation, or simply to sit with her on the porch as the sun set. Their conversations ranged widely from books they had read to their hopes for the ranch's future, from their childhoods to their views on child rearing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, their relationship deepened. The formal politeness of their early interactions gave way to comfortable familiarity. Grace began to recognize the subtle shifts in Dawson's expression that indicated his moods, while he learned to read her own temperament in the set of her shoulders or the tone of her voice. There were no passionate embraces or declarations of undying love, but there were small, meaningful moments, his hand lingering on hers when he helped her from the wagon, her fingers straightening his collar before Sunday church, shared smiles over private jokes. The day before the wedding, Grace moved her belongings to the ranch. It wasn't much: her trunk of clothes, a few books, her sewing supplies, and personal mementos. But as she unpacked in what would soon be their shared bedroom, she felt a profound sense of rightness. She had come west seeking a new beginning, and against all odds, she had found it not with the young man who had advertised for a bride, but with a mature rancher who valued her for exactly who she was. Not despite her age, but because of it. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, a perfect September morning. Grace dressed in her blue silk gown, the one she had brought for her meeting with James Elliott. Alina helped her with her hair, arranging it in a becoming style with small white flowers tucked into the coils. "You look beautiful," Alina said, her eyes suspiciously moist. "Like Queen." The church in Panamint was indeed small but charming, with simple wooden pews and colorful stained glass windows. It was filled to capacity for the ceremony, not just with friends like Mrs. Willoughby and Mrs. Peterson, but with ranchers from neighboring properties, townspeople Grace had met through the store, and even a few of the other mail-order brides who had found matches in the area. Dawson waited at the altar, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a new suit. But when Grace entered, his face transformed with a smile that made her heart beat faster. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sincere. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Dawson's kiss was gentle but lingering, a promise of affection to come. The reception at the ranch was a joyous affair. Alina had outdone herself with the food, preparing a feast that blended traditional Mexican dishes with American favorites. There was music, a local fiddler and guitarist playing lively tunes that had guests dancing in the yard. Even Dawson, not naturally given to revelry, joined in, sweeping Grace into a surprisingly graceful waltz. As the afternoon waned, guests began to depart, offering good wishes and congratulations. By sunset, only the Rodriguez family remained, and they tactfully retired to their cabin after helping to clean up the worst of the mess. Suddenly, Grace and Dawson were alone, truly alone as husband and wife for the first time. An awkward silence fell between them as they stood in the parlor, the reality of their new relationship settling around them like an unfamiliar cloak. "Would you like some tea?" Dawson asked, breaking the silence. Grace smiled at the prosaic question. "Yes, that would be nice." In the kitchen, they moved around each other, establishing a new rhythm, Dawson putting the kettle on the stove, Grace finding cups and saucers. It was domestic and ordinary, yet charged with awareness of the intimacy to come. With tea prepared, they sat on the porch swing, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky. Dawson's arm rested along the back of the swing, not quite touching her shoulders but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Are you happy, Grace?" he asked softly. She considered the question seriously. "Yes, I believe I am. It's not the life I imagined as a young woman, but it feels right," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I feel the same. When Rebecca died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on building the ranch, telling myself it was enough." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "But it wasn't. A house needs to be a home. A man needs companionship, someone to share his days and nights." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I'm glad you saw something in me worth taking a chance on. Many men would have dismissed me as too old." "Their loss," he said firmly. "Age means you know what matters. I saw in you a woman who understood the value of hard work, who wouldn't be crushed by the realities of ranch life. A woman who could be a true partner. And I saw in you a man of integrity and purpose," she replied. "Someone who values substance over appearance, who judges character rather than years." His arm slipped from the back of the swing to her shoulders, drawing her closer. "We'll build a good life together, Grace. I promise you that. I believe we will." When their tea was finished, they retired to their bedroom by mutual, unspoken consent. The awkwardness returned briefly as they prepared for bed, but it was tempered by the genuine affection that had grown between them over the past weeks. Their first night together was not a passionate consummation from a romance novel, but a gentle, considerate exploration. Dawson was attentive to her comfort, and Grace found herself responding with unexpected warmth to his touch. There was tenderness in their lovemaking, and afterward, a peaceful contentment as they lay together in the darkness, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "Good night, wife," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good night, husband," she replied, the words both strange and wonderful on her lips. The days and weeks that followed settled into a rhythm of shared work and domestic harmony. Grace took over the household management, freeing Alina to focus on cooking and garden work. She established a small millinery business in the sewing room, creating hats to order for the ladies of Panamint and surrounding ranches. The extra income was modest but satisfying, and the creative outlet kept her mind engaged. Dawson consulted her on ranch decisions, valuing her practical intelligence and financial acumen. Together, they decided to purchase the Hollister property to the south, expanding their holdings and securing water rights that would be valuable in dry years. Autumn faded into winter, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch work slowed with the season, allowing for cozy evenings by the fire, reading aloud or simply talking. Their physical relationship deepened as their comfort with each other grew, affection blossoming into something warmer and more urgent. It was during one of these winter evenings, as they sat before the fire with mugs of hot cider, that Grace broached a subject that had been on her mind. "Dawson," she began hesitantly, "I know we haven't spoken much about children. At my age, it may not be possible." He set down his mug and took her hand. "Are you with child, Grace?" She nodded, a mix of joy and anxiety on her face. "I believe so. My monthly has not come and I've been feeling unwell in the mornings." His expression was one of wonder and concern. "Are you afraid?" "A little," she admitted. "Childbirth is never without risk, and at my age, the dangers are greater." He moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking both her hands in his. "We will take every precaution. The doctor in town is good and we'll bring him here when your time comes. Alina has delivered many babies. You won't face this alone." His earnest concern touched her deeply. "You're pleased then?" More than pleased, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I had resigned myself to a life without children after Rebecca. This is a blessing I never expected. He pressed a gentle hand to her still flat abdomen, his expression one of awe. In that moment, Grace knew with certainty that what had begun as a practical arrangement had blossomed into love deep, abiding love based on respect, shared purpose, and growing passion. I love you, Dawson Price, she said, the words rising naturally from her heart. His eyes, when they met hers, shone with answering emotion. And I love you, Grace Price, more than I ever thought possible. Their kiss was tender but fervent, sealing their declaration and celebrating the new life growing within her. Spring came early that year, bringing green grass and wildflowers to the ranch. Grace's condition became evident as her slender form rounded with the child. Dawson was protective but not smothering, understanding her need to remain active and engaged. Alina fussed over her like a mother hen, preparing special teas and nutritious meals to support her health. In May, when the apple trees were in full bloom, Grace went into labor. True to his word, Dawson brought the doctor from town, along with a midwife recommended by Mrs. Willoughby. The birth was difficult and prolonged, but Grace faced it with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout their marriage. As dawn broke after a long night, their son was born a healthy boy with a lusty cry and his father's clear blue eyes. They named him Thomas, after Grace's father. Holding her son in her arms, with Dawson seated beside her on the bed, his arm protective around her shoulders, Grace felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Are you in pain?" Dawson asked anxiously, wiping a tear from her cheek. "No," she assured him. "Just overwhelmingly happy. A year ago I was alone in Boston, believing my chance for this kind of happiness had passed. Now look at us." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Age means you know what matters," he reminded her. "And what matters is this family, love, building a life together." "You were right," she agreed, gazing down at their sleeping son. "Some things are worth waiting for." As summer turned to autumn, and Thomas grew from a newborn to a chubby, smiling baby, the ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. They added a new wing to the house, hired additional hands for the expanded operation, and even built a small schoolhouse for the children of their workers and eventually, for Thomas and any siblings who might follow. On their first wedding anniversary, they held a small celebration at the ranch. Friends from town joined them, including Mrs. Willoughby and several of the former mail-order brides who had found matches in the area. James Elliott came too, with his young wife Caroline, the bride who had been meant for him all along. As Grace watched her husband bouncing their son on his knee, his face alight with joy, she reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A mix-up, a misunderstanding, and what could have been a humiliating rejection had instead led to the richest blessings of her life. That night, with Thomas sleeping soundly in his cradle and the ranch peaceful under a canopy of stars, Dawson took her hands as they prepared for bed. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a delicate gold band set with a single pearl. "I know our courtship wasn't conventional and our wedding was hastily arranged. You never had a proper engagement ring." "Oh, Dawson," she breathed, touched by the thoughtful gesture. "I chose a pearl because they gain their beauty through time and experience, just like you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, beside her plain gold wedding band. "Each year we're together adds another layer of luster to our marriage." Grace felt her heart swell with love for this man who valued depth over superficiality, substance over appearance, and who had seen in her age-ripened character something precious, rather than something to be dismissed. I wouldn't change a single moment of our journey together, she told him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. Not the mix-up that brought me here, not the awkwardness of our courtship, not even the hard days of ranch life. Nor would I, he agreed, drawing her close. Every day with you confirms what I knew when I first read your letter, that a woman who knows her own mind and heart is worth far more than all the giggling young girls in California. In the soft lamplight of their bedroom, husband and wife embraced, secure in the knowledge that what they had found together mature, steadfast love built on mutual respect and shared purpose was precious beyond measure. It had come to them later than convention dictated, but exactly when they were ready to appreciate its true value. Age, as Dawson had said from the beginning, meant they knew what mattered. And what mattered was this: two lives intertwined, strengthened by experience, blessed by love, and enriched by the wisdom that comes only with time. Years would pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Thomas would be joined by a sister, Rebecca Elena, born when Grace was 41. The ranch would grow and prosper under their stewardship, becoming one of the most respected operations in the region. They would weather droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and personal losses, always facing challenges together with the resilience born of deep affection and shared purpose. And through it all, Grace would be grateful for the twist of fate that led a 38-year-old Boston seamstress to a California rancher who believed that age wasn't a liability, but an asset, that it meant knowing what truly mattered in this wild, unpredictable, beautiful life they had built together.